Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating prophecy from the Hebrew Scriptures, one that set up an expectation that lasted for centuries. So this promise, it's right out of the book of Deuteronomy, and it talks about a future leader, a prophet who would be like unto Moses. Now, to really unpack this single, powerful idea, we're going to lean on the analysis of William Hanna Thomson from his work, The Great Argument.
You can imagine, for generations, this was the question, just hanging in the air. A figure was coming who would be as important as Moses, the guy who basically founded the nation. But who on earth could possibly fill those shoes?
Okay, so to really get why this promise was such a big deal, you first have to understand the problem it was designed to solve. And that whole story kicks off at a mountain called Horeb, which you might also know as Sinai.
I mean, just picture the scene for a second. The entire nation is gathered at the bottom of a mountain, and they are witnessing the direct, unfiltered presence of God. And we're not talking about some gentle, comforting light. The text says it was a great fire. So instead of being this amazing moment of connection, it was just terrifying.
Yeah, it was so intense, so overwhelming that the people made this absolutely desperate plea. They're basically saying, we can't handle this. This direct connection is too much. We need someone to stand in the middle for us. They were literally asking for a mediator.
Okay, and right here, this is where the whole story takes a turn. Because in direct response to that terrified request, a very specific solution gets promised.
So God hears them and basically says, you know what, you're right. He agrees they need an intermediary, and he makes this promise. And the language here is so important. The prophet will be like unto thee, meaning like Moses, and God himself will put the words right in his mouth. So this really locks in the job description for this future prophet. They weren't just going to be a messenger, like a divine delivery person. They were meant to be a true mediator, a go-between, a bridge, really, between the divine and the human.
But here's the kicker. What does like Moses actually mean? The prophecy didn't just say any prophet was coming. It specified someone who could meet that incredibly unique standard. And as Thomson argues, this set the bar astronomically high.
And this is where we see a huge difference. On one hand, you have a regular prophet. They speak God's word. They might even foretell the future. But a prophet like Moses? Oh, that's a whole different level. This is someone who is a foundational lawgiver, a national leader, and the ultimate mediator with God, all rolled into one. And for hundreds and hundreds of years, nobody even tried to claim that title. Thomson points out that all the prophets who came later, we're talking big names like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they all operated within the system that Moses had set up. They never claimed to replace him or to be his equal.
And wow, this quote just drives that point home, doesn't it? This is from the book of Malachi, the very last of the Old Testament prophets. And what's his final word of advice? Remember the law of Moses. That shows you that even centuries later, Moses' authority was still number one. The promised prophet, well, he hadn't shown up yet.
So the clock keeps ticking for centuries, right? Then, according to Thomson's analysis, we get to the 1st century and the arrival of Jesus. And it's here, Thomson argues, that for the first time, someone steps forward and claims an authority that actually measures up to this unique standard.
And a perfect place to see this in action is in the famous Sermon on the Mount. Look at how he starts off. He acknowledges the existing law of Moses, something everyone in his audience would have known by heart. He says, you've heard it said, thou shalt not kill. Okay, he's setting the baseline.
And then he drops the bombshell. But I say unto you. Now you have to understand, this was absolutely radical. No prophet had ever done this. Thomson argues he's not just explaining the law or giving his commentary on it. He's actually amending it, expanding it, and he's doing it completely on his own authority.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing. He does this over and over again throughout the sermon. This pattern, you have heard it said, but I say unto you, it's the very structure of his teaching. He is consistently positioning his own declaration as the new higher standard of law. He was, in effect, acting as a new lawgiver.
But it didn't stop there. Thomson points out that Jesus made another claim that was, if anything, even more staggering. In passages like this one, he puts himself in the role of humanity's ultimate judge on the final day, a role that everyone understood belonged to God and God alone. Okay, so let's take a step back. We've got this ancient fear,
this specific promise of a prophet like Moses, and now these just unprecedented claims from Jesus. So how, according to Thomson, does this all snap together?
All right, let's just walk through Thomson's whole argument step by step. It started with the people's fear, which led to God's promise of a mediator, someone with the unique authority of Moses. For centuries, that role stayed empty. No prophet came close. Then Jesus arrives on the scene, not only claiming authority over the Mosaic law itself, but also presenting himself as the final judge of all people.
And this brings us to the core of Thomson's point. To make claims like these, to change God's law and to be the final judge, it's so audacious that it really only leaves you with two possibilities. Either the person saying them is completely delusional, or the claims are true. And that level of authority could only be justified if the speaker was, in fact, that long-awaited prophet.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really big idea to chew on. This whole argument shifts the focus away from a list of rules and puts it squarely on a person. So we're left with the question, what does it actually mean for a faith to be built not on a new law, but on the personal authority of a new lawgiver? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.